Is that share working?
Beautiful.
Great. So thank you for joining me today as I defend my proposal for my doctoral research titled Negotiating Demands and Resources, a Double Hermeneutic Phenomenological Study of Teacher Well-Being Among Veteran Educators. Before I jump into my defense, I'd like to take a moment to thank some of the people who helped me get here today. First and foremost, thank you to my adventurous and incredibly supportive family. Your encouragement, flexibility, and belief in me, especially when this journey demanded time, patience, and balance, has made all the difference. You remind me that there is no mountain too high, that life truly is an adventure. We can accomplish anything if we work hard, and that the joy is in the journey. Thank you to my SNHU Mixed Methods cohort, my classmates, my colleagues, and my friends. I did not anticipate the bond we would create, nor the level of support, humor, and encouragement we would share. This experience has been richer because of you. As well, thank you to the SNHU faculty who have helped me be ready for this point in the journey. Thank you to my Grantham Village School family. You inspire me every day. Your commitment to students, to one another, and to the work we do is at the heart of why this research matters to me. And finally, thank you to my dissertation committee, Dr. Trubridge, Dr. Donnelly, and Dr. Richardson. I am deeply grateful for your guidance, your thoughtful feedback, and your support throughout this process. I look forward to continuing our work together in the months ahead. With that, I'm excited to share my study with you. This slide represents my professional journey and helps explain both my why and my positionality in this study. I began my career in health and wellness, earning my undergraduate degree in health and human performance with an emphasis in health and wellness from the University of Montana in 1996. At the time, I quickly learned that career opportunities in health promotion were limited. That led me back to school, where I earned my master's degree in elementary education from Fitchburg State University. I went on to teach for 20 years, 6 years in fifth grade and 14 years in first grade. Throughout my teaching career, I found that my background in health and wellness consistently informed how I approach students, stress, and classroom relationships. Like many educators, I also worked a second job for a period of time, serving as a health and wellness coach. In 2021, after being encouraged by others throughout my career, I earned my principal certification through Plymouth State University. I have since served 1 year as an associate principal and 5 years as principal. This professional journey and my deep commitment to supporting educators and students ultimately led me to pursue doctoral study in educational leadership at Southern New Hampshire University. I achieved ABD status in November 2025, and I continue this work with the hope of contributing to more sustainable, supportive conditions for educators, even if that impact just begins in my own small corner of the world. This study emerges from both my lived professional experiences and a broader recognition that public elementary schools operate within systems of sustained organizational change and increasing complexity. Although recent conversations often center on post-pandemic stress, the research makes it clear that educator stress and burnout are not new phenomenon. These challenges long predate COVID-19 and have continued to intensify over time. Teacher well-being cannot be viewed solely as an individual or personal issue. It has direct and meaningful implications for instructional quality, school climate, and student outcomes. This study frames teacher well-being as a systemic concern, one shaped by organizational conditions, leadership practices, and school structures, rather than a matter of individual resilience or coping alone. So the statement of the problem: Teacher mental health challenges have reached critical levels in public education. However, this issue extends far beyond individual well-being. When educators experience ongoing stress, burnout, and emotional strain, the effects are instructional and organizational. These challenges influence the quality of teaching, the classroom climate, and ultimately student outcomes. So while this study centers on educator well-being, the broader concern is how these conditions shape the overall functioning and effectiveness of schools. Research consistently shows that a large proportion of teachers report high levels of work-related stress, with chronic stress linked to burnout, depression, and attrition. Importantly, the literature emphasizes that this stress is not simply the result of individual coping capacity or personal resilience. Instead, it is shaped by working conditions, leadership expectations, and organizational structures. This shifts the focus from fixing teachers to examining how school systems and leadership practices contribute to or can reduce educator stress. Teacher well-being has implications that extend directly to students in schools. Elevated educator stress is associated with less supportive student-teacher relationships, challenges in classroom management, and lower instructional quality. Over time, these effects influence student engagement, learning, and social development. In addition, teacher stress is strongly linked to attrition. When teachers leave, instructional continuity is disrupted and school climate and stability suffer. This reinforces that educator well-being is central to both staff sustainability and student success. This image represents what the research describes as the weight of teaching. Educators carry multiple, often competing demands, accountability pressures, student behavioral and mental health needs, instructional expectations, and complex family dynamics. At the same time, schools increasingly rely on teachers to provide emotional support and stability for students, often without additional training, time, or structural support. This accumulation of responsibilities creates a level of work intensification that is difficult to sustain. As Leithwood reminds us, teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. And as Fullen states, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Together, these ideas underscore the central problem of the study. When the system does not adequately support educator well-being, both teachers and students are affected. The purpose of this study is to explore how veteran elementary educators experience and make meaning of well-being across their teaching careers. Rather than measuring stress levels or evaluating specific interventions, this study focuses on educators' lived experiences. It seeks to understand how teachers interpret their well-being within the everyday realities of their work. This places educators' perspectives at the center, recognizing them as experts in their own professional realities. This study also examines how leadership behaviors and organizational practices function within teachers' experiences. Specifically, these factors are considered as job demands or job resources, conditions that either deplete educators' capacity or support their ability to sustain well-being over time. This framing moves the discussion beyond individual coping and toward the systems that shape educators' daily work. In this way, a key goal of this study is to inform leadership and organizational practices that support sustainable educator well-being. By understanding how teachers experience organizational conditions, this research seeks to identify leadership approaches and school structures that can reduce strain and strengthen support. In this way, the study connects educator well-being directly to school improvement in leadership practice. So ultimately, this study is grounded in a broader vision for education, the need to attain a new equilibrium. This equilibrium is one in which schools actively encourage and sustain healthy, energized educators who have the capacity to meet students' needs while also having their own professional and personal needs recognized and supported. The goal is an educational system where teacher well-being is treated as a leading indicator of school health, not a secondary or optional concern. As established in the problem statement, meaningful and sustainable student success depends on leadership and organizational systems that place educator well-being at the forefront. This study is significant because it intentionally shifts the framing of teacher well-being away from an over-reliance on individual coping and self-care strategies and toward organizational responsibility and leadership influence. While individual strategies can be supportive, the literature consistently shows that educator stress is shaped by the conditions in which teachers work each day. By grounding this study in the job demands resource model and resilience theory, the research positions leadership practices and organizational structures as central mechanisms that either intensify stress or function as protective resources for educator well-being. From a practice perspective, this study has the potential to inform leadership decision-making in school improvement efforts by amplifying the lived experiences of veteran elementary educators. By examining how teachers interpret leadership behaviors, expectations, and organizational systems over time, the findings may help school leaders better understand how everyday decisions related to workload, communication, support, and organizational pacing are experienced as either demands or resources. This insight supports leaders in creating more sustainable, health-promoting work environments. This study is also significant in addressing teacher retention and long-term sustainability in the profession. Research shows that chronic stress, burnout, and insufficient organizational support are primary drivers of attrition, particularly among experienced educators. By focusing on veteran teachers' perspectives, this study contributes to understanding what conditions support educators' capacity to remain engaged and effective over time, which has direct implications for workforce stability, instructional continuity, and student outcomes. Finally, research contributes to the scholarly conversation by extending the application of the job demands resource framework and resilience theory within an elementary education context. Rather than treating resilience as an individual trait, the study emphasizes resilience as a negotiated, relational process shaped by leadership and organizational conditions. In doing so, the findings may inform leadership preparation, professional learning, and policy discussions focused on building sustainable educational environments that support both educator well-being and student success. The literature review examines 4 major bodies of research: educator stress, burnout, and mental health, organizational and leadership influences on well-being, teacher attrition and workforce sustainability, and the impact of teacher well-being on students and school climate. Together, these areas establish that teacher well-being is a persistent systemic issue with implications beyond individual educators. This slide, though it may be difficult for you to see in this format, introduces educator well-being as a continuum, ranging from critical or injured states to thriving. Rather than presenting well-being as a fixed or linear condition, the model emphasizes that educators may move in multiple directions over time. Mental health challenges such as stress, burnout, compassion fatigue, and trauma fall within this continuum and may emerge or recede depending on changing demands, available resources, and recovery opportunities. The adapted arrows and labels highlight that well-being fluctuates and is strongly influenced by organizational conditions, stress exposure, and access to support and healing, reinforcing the idea that educator well-being is dynamic and context dependent. Teacher well-being is shaped Teacher well-being is shaped by both organizational conditions and leadership practices. Factors like workload and available resources, school culture and climate, policies and support systems, and the pace of change create the environment educators work within each day. Leadership then plays a key role in how those conditions are experienced. Practices such as support and recognition, clear communication and trust, involvement in decision-making, and empathy and care influence whether educators feel supported or strained. Together, these organizational and leadership factors are linked to well-being outcomes, including lower stress and burnout, stronger job satisfaction and commitment, and positive outcomes for students. This slide uses the metaphor of boiled frog syndrome to illustrate how unsustainable work conditions develop over time. If a frog is dropped directly into boiling water, it immediately jumps out and escapes, much like a person who recognizes an unsustainable job right away. In contrast, when a frog is placed in cool water that is gradually heated, it adapts as the temperature rises until it is ultimately boiled. This mirrors what often happens in education. Educators begin their careers in manageable conditions, but over time, work demands steadily increase without corresponding resources or recovery opportunities. Because the change is gradual, the strain may go unrecognized until it results in significant stress, burnout, negative mental health outcomes, and ultimately attrition. The literature also demonstrates a clear connection between teacher well-being and student outcomes. When educators experience high stress and burnout, research links this to lower morale, weaker instruction, and less effective classroom management, contributing to student disengagement and behavioral challenges. In contrast, educator well-being supports stronger relationships, instructional quality, and positive classroom climates. So taken together, the literature confirms that teacher mental health challenges are widespread and persistent across context and time. The research further shows that educator well-being directly affects instructional quality, relationships, and retention. These effects extend beyond teachers themselves, shaping student experiences and broader school climate. Although individual coping strategies are commonly emphasized in the literature, meaningful and sustained improvement in educator well-being requires shifts in leadership practices and organizational conditions. The literature reveals three key gaps: limited focus on organizational and leadership factors influencing teacher stress, an overemphasis on individual self-care rather than systemic solutions, and a lack of qualitative research capturing veteran teachers' lived experiences across their careers. This study responds directly to the gaps by examining how leadership and organizational practices function as job demands or resources, how educators make meaning of their well-being over time, and by framing teacher well-being as a systemic, not an individual phenomenon. This study is grounded in two complementary theoretical frameworks: the job demands resources, or JDR theory, and the resilience theory. Together, these frameworks provide the lens for understanding how teacher well-being is shaped by both organizational conditions and educators' lived experiences over time. The job demands resource framework explains that stress increases when job demands outweigh available resources. Within this model, leadership practices and organizational decisions can function either as demands that intensify stress or resources that help buffer stress and support well-being. While the JDR framework focuses on the balance between demands and resources, resilience theory emphasizes how well-being is shaped by how individuals interpret and make meaning of their experiences, and by the presence of supportive environments that strengthen resilience over time. Taken together, these frameworks show that teacher stress and well-being are influenced by both organizational conditions and leadership practices, as well as by how educators experience and interpret those conditions over time. So the research questions I'll share next are intentionally aligned with the two theoretical frameworks guiding this study: the job demands resource model and resilience theory. Together, these frameworks position teacher well-being as a dynamic process shaped by the interaction between job demands, available resources, leadership practices, and educators' meaning-making over time. The first research question invites veteran elementary educators to reflect on their lived experiences of well-being across their careers. It establishes a broad, experience-centered foundation for the study before narrowing to specific personal, organizational, and leadership influences. The second research question asks educators to explain the personal, professional, and organizational factors that have supported or challenged their well-being throughout their careers. This question helps surface how demands and resources have been experienced over time. The third research question shifts the focus more directly to the organization and leadership by examining how veteran educators interpret leadership practices and organizational systems as influencing their experiences of well-being. This slide provides a brief overview of the research design. The study uses a qualitative approach grounded in a double hermeneutic phenomenological methodology and a constructivist epistemological perspective. Together, these elements reflect a focus on interpretation and meaning-making of educators' lived experiences, which aligns directly with the purpose and research questions of the study. So, this study is grounded in a constructivist epistemological perspective, which assumes that meaning is constructed through individuals' lived experiences and interpretations rather than passively discovered. This study is a qualitative, double hermeneutic phenomenological case study. To break that down, the next few slides walk through what each part of that design means and why it was appropriate for this study. First, this is a qualitative study. The focus is on understanding educators' experiences through their own words rather than through numerical data or measurement. Second, the study uses a double hermeneutic approach. This means participants interpret and make sense of their own lived experiences, and then I, as the researcher, then interpret how participants are making meaning of those experiences. Third, this study is phenomenological. The purpose is to explore educators' lived experiences of a shared phenomenon, in this case, teacher well-being within organizational contexts. Finally, this study is framed as a case study, which allows for an in-depth examination of a bounded group within a specific context. In this case, the bounded group is veterans public elementary educators in a New England state. This research design allows for a deep exploration of how veteran elementary educators interpret and make meaning of their experiences of well-being within organizational contexts. By using a qualitative, double hermeneutic phenomenological case study, the study centers educators' voices while also acknowledging that meaning is shaped through interpretation over time. This approach aligns directly with the research questions and supports a nuanced understanding of how organizational conditions and leadership practices are experienced in everyday school contexts. The population for this study is elementary educators from one New England state. To be included, participants must have a minimum of 10 years of teaching experience, which allows the study to focus on veteran educators. The interview sample will consist of approximately 10 to 15 participants, which is consistent with qualitative research guidance for in-depth phenomenological studies. This veteran focus supports an examination of sustained organizational exposure, allowing participants to reflect on how leadership practices in working conditions have shaped their well-being over time. Data for this study will be collected in two phases. First, an online qualitative survey will be administered through Qualtrics to gather broad contextual insights into educators' experiences of well-being. Second, semi-structured interviews will be conducted via Microsoft Teams to explore participants' lived experiences in greater depth. Interviews will be audio and video recorded and transcribed, with transcripts reviewed for accuracy. Member checking will be used to enhance trustworthiness by inviting participants to review and clarify their transcripts. Overall, data collection centers on educators' lived experiences of well-being within their professional contexts. Data analysis will follow Saldana's guidance and involve 2 cycles of qualitative manual coding. During the first cycle, both inductive and deductive coding strategies will be used concurrently, including in vivo coding, to ensure that participants' language and voice remain central to the analysis. A thematic analysis will then be conducted to identify recurring patterns and shared meanings across the data. The initial codes will be reviewed, refined, and synthesized using pattern coding to develop broader categories and themes. Thematic analysis will be guided by the job demands resources and resilience frameworks, allowing for interpretation of how leadership practices and organizational demands and resources are experienced by educators. Throughout the analysis process, bracketed analytic memos will be used to support reflexivity, mitigate potential bias, and preserve the context and complexity of participants' experiences. Rigor and trustworthiness will be further strengthened through member checking and triangulation using Microsoft Teams transcripts and audio recordings. This study has several limitations worth noting. First, the use of a small sample of veteran elementary educators from one New England state limits generalizability to other contexts. Second, because the data are self-reported, participants' responses may be influenced by recall or professional concerns, despite assurances of confidentiality. Researcher positionality is also a consideration. As a current school administrator and former elementary educator, my professional background may influence how data are interpreted. To mitigate these limitations, the study incorporates multiple strategies, including ongoing reflexivity, the use of bracketed analytic memos, member checking, and transparency in methodology. Together, these approaches strengthen the credibility and trustworthiness of the findings. These delimitations reflect intentional choices made to support depth, focus, and coherence in the study. The study focuses on public elementary schools to maintain consistency in organizational structures, accountability systems, and leadership expectations. This supports clearer interpretation of how organizational and leadership practices shape educator well-being. Participants are limited to veteran educators with 10 or more years of experience, as they offer a perspective on well-being across multiple career stages, reforms, and changing demands. The study focuses on one New England state to make participant recruitment manageable and to keep the educational context consistent across educators. Finally, private schools and novice educators are excluded to avoid introducing substantially different organizational contexts in early career factors that fall outside the scope of this investigation. Together, these delimitations ensure alignment with the research questions and theoretical framework while supporting a focused analysis. This study meets the criteria for minimal risk and follows established ethical guidelines for qualitative research. Participation is fully voluntary, and participants will be informed that they may withdraw at any time without penalty. This will be clearly outlined during the consent process and reiterated prior to interviews. Confidentiality will be maintained throughout the study through the use of pseudonyms and the removal of identifying information. All recordings and transcripts will be stored securely on password-protected devices accessible only to the researcher. Finally, member checking will be used to enhance credibility, allowing participants to review and clarify their interview data to ensure their experiences are represented accurately. Together, these procedures align with IRB requirements and support ethical and respectful engagement with participants. I want to close by returning to the core belief that guides this work. Teacher well-being is shaped by the conditions in which educators work. This study is designed to better understand those conditions through the voices of experienced educators, with the hope of informing leadership practices that support sustainability, well-being, and meaningful work over time. And my references can be accessed using the QR code, so I'm going to leave that there for a minute in case you want to access that. Or less than a minute, a few seconds. And thank you for your time and consideration. I welcome your questions and feedback.
Thank you, Kristen, and
Thank
well
you.
done. Well done.
Thank you.
Um, I am now going to give the committee the opportunity to ask questions, and I'm going to start. I have a question for you. Um, like I said, very well done. I want to ask you something about within your own organization. So, this is just kind of a hypothetical now, knowing what you know. So, within your organization, if you were to be given money today, how would you spend the money for educator well-being?
Well, my hope is that my research will actually give me that information as to where I
Mm.
will spend that money. So the findings from my research should provide, or my hope is that they'll provide um, context-specific guidance on where I would spend the money to help educator well-being. But with that said, if I had to choose right now, based on my experiences as a teacher and a leader, one immediate way I would spend the money is to get duty teachers. So teachers that could come in and take the load off and do recess duty and lunch duty so that teachers had more time for collaboration and prep work.
I like that. You know what? Something that you said that is so important, and which is why we do phenomenological research, is it's so easy for us to make assumptions. Oh, I know how I would spend money, or I know. And in fact, we need to hear from the teachers and educators themselves. How do they feel they could use money? I like that. I appreciate that. I have one more question. Within your study, how do you feel that being a participant in your study will actually contribute to their well-being?
Sure. Um, I think that educators often feel unheard, and by giving
Mm.
them this opportunity to be heard and to reflect on their experiences, it can validate
Mm.
who they are and what they're feeling. Um, and it might give them the opportunity to reframe some of their stressors and contemplate some of the resources that are available that they could take advantage of.
Yeah, I look forward to kind of hearing about that, how that, when you talk about the demand and resource, how literally just being a participant becomes a resource. That'll be interesting and
Hopefully.
supports the resilience. Um, Dr. Richardson, Dr. Donnelly, who would like to jump in with?
Deanna, go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it. Kristen, excellent job. Really
Thank
great job. You're very well prepared and ready to move forward if we go that way, which I'm sure it's going to be fine. In your significance of the study slide, you mentioned that you were going to focus on sustainable educational environments. And I was wondering, how are you defining sustainable educational environments within your study?
So that's a great question, and it's not one of the key terms that I used. But if I were to, and this is like off the cuff because I wasn't expecting the question, um,
No
it's an
pressure.
environment where teachers feel that they have the resources to meet the demands or to buffer the demands and create an environment where it's sustainable, where they can stay and feel healthy and have a holistic experience of well-being versus just getting by.
So that's a great answer. And it also goes back to what Sarah said, is through your research, you might realize through your coding what they feel is sustainable
For
for
sure.
them.
Great point.
So
Yep.
it goes both ways. I do have another one. Dr. Richardson, do you want to go or do you want me to
No,
finish?
go ahead.
Okay. In the slide that talks about you're in your lit review, you talk about how leadership and organizational practices function as demands or resources. Can you explain how your study will identify which organizational practices have become chronic demands over time and how leaders can address the stressors? I'm very interested in this study. I'm very interested for you to find out like how are we as leaders not helping and not giving resources, but giving demands. I would love to know how you would identify which practices are causing the most stress.
So I think that's all going to come out through the coding and in the thematic analysis. I don't think that's something I can answer right now
Mhm.
before the research is done. I think the answers are going to come through from the research.
Great. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Kristen,
Dr.
well
Donnelly.
done.
Thank you.
You had a slide on mitigation strategies. Could you say more about what you'll do to mitigate and increase trustworthiness?
Sure. So my hope is that the people, the participants will feel comfortable in the research, in the interview. It'll be on Zoom, so they'll be in their place of safety wherever they choose that will be. Um, I will ensure that they understand that everything, all the information I gather will be secure and it will remain confidential. I do see that that could lead to some discomfort on participants' part because it's their jobs, it's their livelihood.
Yes.
And they may and they may feel uncomfortable divulging some of that, especially with a current administrator. Um, but my hope is that through the assurances that I give them and hopefully my personality, they'll feel comfortable and that will mitigate some of the discomfort that they may feel. Um, I'm trying to think as well. I forget where I was going to go next. Again, it's going to remain confidential, um, and everything will be secure on my password protected computer.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, what I'd like to do now, I'm trying to see Dr. Richardson and Dr. Donnelly. Do we have any, can you see, or do we, I don't see any faculty, new faculty uh, here, but I do see some folks from the SNU community. So I'd like to invite anybody from the SNU community to either put their face on the screen, raise your hand if you have a question. And I'll just wait a minute or a few seconds to see if anybody in the community has any questions. And not seeing that anybody has any questions at this time, what we do in the process is the committee will now go to a breakout room and we will talk amongst ourselves while you talk amongst yourselves. And then Kristen will be inviting you into the room and share with you our thoughts and next steps. And then, like I said, I invite everyone on the call here to just hang tight. We won't be long, and you'll want to hear, I'm sure, our results. So I'm going to go. I'm going to also pause the recording right now. Hold on a second. Oh goodness, make sure I press. And are we all back? Let's see. Okay. At this time, I would like to congratulate Kristen and say that she did an excellent job with presenting her proposal, and she is ready to proceed on to the next step, but not before celebrating. And I want you to celebrate this step in the process. And John, I know it's your birthday, so it's a dual celebration. Happy birthday.
Sorry,
And
John.
I want to also extend a thank you to everybody who took the time to support Kristen and come and share in this really extraordinary proposal. So thank you, Kristen. Thank you to my colleagues, Dr. Richardson, Dr. Donnelly, and happy celebration.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, I will have this recording. I'll be sending it in and doing my part with, as chair, what I need to do to follow up. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kristen.
Thank you
Moving
so much.
forward.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well
Thank you very
done.
much.
Excellent.
Do I just leave now?
We
Yeah. Okay.
stop